These people used what I call spiritual weapons. They used these spiritual weapons in this spiritual battle in order for them to win this spiritual war. And we need to go over one more parable on this lesson, and that's located in Luke 19, starting in verse 11. Once again, you should stop the video, read this parable in Luke 19, verses 11 through 27, and then resume the video. And if it's not a convenient situation right now, then go ahead and just continue with the video right now. But either way, make sure that you read this parable before the next lesson. Now, this parable is called, in some translations, the parable of the minas, and that was a type of money. And when you read this parable, you'll discover one very important thing. Each person's there was different. Their reward in the kingdom was better because of what they did and how well they performed while the king was gone. And when he returned, he received his kingdom, and it was time to go there. He that was faithful in little, he now deemed to be faithful in much. And it was then time for them to go there. And when they go there, they will receive their just reward. Notice, starting in verse 16, the first one who received the mina took it and earned 10 minas with it. The king said to him, "Well done, good servant, because you were faithful in very little. You have authority over 10 cities." Did you see how that was happening? Do you see while the king is gone, we must be doing business until he comes? We must be faithful and not faithless. And starting in verse 18, he said, "And the second came, saying, Your mina has earned 5 minas. And likewise the king said, You will be over 5 cities. Did you catch that? Did they both get the same reward? No. Did they each get rewarded differently according to what they did while the king was gone? Yes. The king is gone for now, and he will return. And when he comes, he'll be checking to see what you did while he was gone. And his reward will be with him to give to those good and faithful servants. Those who are faithful in little and faithful with their actions. So no matter how you look at it, some very important things need to happen between here and there. And those things are a big part of this course. There's a lot more than I'm explaining here, but we need to start somewhere. And as we go through this course, I'll elaborate on these things. Now that we have the foundation, let's give you the first lesson. You are here, and you want to be there. And now we know that you need to do something significant, or at least deemed a faithful servant by the king. So you need to start moving from here to there. You need to start moving there with your words. You need to start moving there with your attitude. You need to start moving there in your thoughts. You need to start moving there in your actions. But we have a problem. Do you know what that problem is? It's the enemy's plan. Yes, the enemy's plan for destroying the faith. As soon as you start moving there, the enemy's plan throws another bomb at you, another maneuver, another tactic or strategy. A strategy designed to destroy the faith, or at least to destroy yours. The enemy wants you faithless. Again, the enemy wants you faithless, not faithful. For believers who want to be there, the enemy's plan is always in motion. The enemy doesn't want the king to be able to say to you, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." What does the enemy want? That is another big part of this course that we'll be going over. So what is the main part of this lesson in the enemy's plan? In the enemy's plan for destroying the faith? Well, this lesson is about enemy strategy number 1, propaganda. Yes, propaganda. I have a lot to tell you about and warn you about regarding propaganda. But let me explain how it works using the foundation that we've already laid. Propaganda starts out simply as this: ignorance. The best form of propaganda is keeping people ignorant. Ignorant of what, you may ask? That's a great question. It starts out simple. Most of us taking this course don't fall into these first steps of ignorance, but they are, first, you keep them ignorant about that there is even a creator. If not, keep them ignorant of who the creator is. And if not that, keep them ignorant that the creator has his inspired word in the scriptures. There are those general first steps. Then the enemy wants you to be ignorant of something very significant. He wants you to be ignorant that you even have an enemy. This is huge. And if he can't get you to believe that, then he wants you to believe that your enemy is really not that much of a challenge, easily overtaken, not an issue to be concerned about. And while that is partially true, at least in the long run, it is also very wrong. Because at least for this time being, the wicked one is alive and well on planet Earth. I would say a lot more about the enemy, but let me say this in this one last point here about this. And we'll continue on this point in another session, and that is this. One thing that the enemy absolutely wants you to believe is that there's only one enemy. And if you're focused only on one enemy and believe that there's no others, then those others can easily catch you off guard. But more on that at a later time. So let's continue on propaganda, specifically on ignorance. What else does the enemy want you to be ignorant of? Well, if the enemy can't get you to be ignorant of the enemy, then the enemy wants you to be ignorant of the fight. There is no battle. Surely you don't have a spiritual battle in your home. Surely you don't have a spiritual battle with your parents. Surely you don't have a spiritual battle with your spouse. And surely you don't have a spiritual battle with your children. And of course, surely you don't have a spiritual battle going on in the congregation. The enemy wants you to believe all those battles don't exist. The enemy's plan is for you to be completely ignorant of those battles and more. In fact, the enemy's plan wants you to believe that there is no such thing as spiritual warfare. Why? Because if you don't fight, the enemy wins. It's that simple. And all these forms of ignorance, and there are a lot more forms that we'll discuss, all lead you to not fighting. And even if you do fight, maybe, just maybe, you won't fight this battle, or you won't fight that battle, and the enemy wins. And while many of Paul's writings are twisted in all kinds of ways by many different people, one translation of a verse in Ephesians 6, verse 12, says it very well and very clear. For we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. We are in a spiritual war, and if you don't believe that, you're going to lose. There are many battles in a full-scale spiritual war that most believers have no clue about. Make no mistake, we are in a massive spiritual war that is composed of many battles. Physical battles, interpersonal battles, emotional battles, battles against your flesh. The battles are endless. But the first and biggest battle of all is the battle for your mind. The battle for words, the battle for meaning, and the battle for truth. I know that I'm going on a bit here, but I see so many believers that are completely clueless about all the battles that they're in. And do you know what happens when you're in a battle and you don't know that you're in a battle? That's right. You lose. Do you realize that the only set of battles I've been talking about here are mainly just the propaganda battles? And specifically, mostly just the first part of propaganda, which is ignorance. We haven't even begun to actually fight. The enemy's strategy of ignorance is designed to have you not fight at all, saying there is no enemy, there is no battle, there is no war. And if he can't keep you ignorant in those ways, then he changes his tactic. In order to catch you off guard, he flips on a dime and allows you to know that you're in a spiritual war. That's right. He allows you to know that you're in a spiritual war. But then, while continuing to use ignorance as a very strategic weapon in other places, regarding spiritual warfare, he then switches to tactic number 2 of propaganda, and that is deception. That's right, deception. Lies, lies, and more lies. The Savior called him the father of lies. And do you know what the most tactical type of deception is? Well, let me quote an evil man, Dr. Goebbels, Adolf Hitler's propaganda minister in Nazi Germany. He is quoted as saying this: the principle, which is quite true in itself, is that in the big lie, there is always a certain force of credibility. Now, some have misquoted this or paraphrased this as, the bigger the lie, the more it will be believed. But regardless of how you say it, unfortunately, to the weaker mind, it's absolutely true. So when it comes to spiritual warfare, and the enemy can't keep you ignorant of the war, then he switches his tactics to deception and starts by trying the big lie. And what is that big lie? Now, I may get a little controversial here, but the enemy's big lie is this: you've already won the war, and you don't need to fight. You've already won the war, and you don't need to fight. That's right, you've already won, and the same enemy goal is achieved. There's no need to fight. You've already won.